Behold Taweret, goddess of childbirth and protector of every laughing home. She walks the threshold between chaos and cradle, where even miracles cry for milk. Thebes shimmered beneath a honey-colored sun, its narrow streets breathing dust and laughter. Women argued over baskets of figs, boys chased goats, and somewhere a temple sistrum rang in lazy rhythm. Amid the noise strode Merit, the midwife whose tongue was sharper than her obsidian blade for cutting cords. She had seen more births than most priests had prayers, and she treated both with equal impatience. Her linen dress was clean only from the knees up. Her copper bracelets clinked like tiny gongs, and her sandals slapped the earth with the authority of someone who feared neither man nor God. When a nervous father begged her to carry an amulet of Taweret, she scoffed. If the goddess wants to help, she can wash her hands first. The city loved her for her results, forgave her for her blasphemy, and whispered that the gods themselves must wince when she raised her voice. Yet the gods do not bruise so easily. From the shadowed sanctuaries and painted walls, Taweret listened, half amused, half intrigued. To mock a deity of birth was one thing. To do so while delivering life after life without failure was another. There was pride in that mortal heartbeat, and laughter too. The kind of laughter that belongs to mothers, midwives, and gods with hips broad enough to carry the world. So the goddess waited, patient as the moon, smiling through her tusks as she planned a small lesson in humility, the sort that begins with a cry and ends in devotion. For in Egypt, even miracles require a sense of humor. The evening settled over Thebes in a haze of smoke and song. The city's rooftops glowed with the last amber light, and the Nile reflected the first stars like sparks caught in ink. Merit was halfway through her supper, a bowl of lentils and a well-earned scowl, when someone began pounding at her door. "Mistress Merit, Nubia's labor has begun!" The messenger, a boy barely old enough to know what that meant, trembled in her doorway like a plucked reed. Merit sighed the sigh of one who has seen too many crises begin with bad timing. "They always start at dinner time," she muttered, tying her sash tighter. "Tell her to wait till sunrise." But she was already reaching for her basket of tools, muttering a list of supplies louder than her prayers. The streets were alive as she marched through them, her sandals slapping stone, her temper leading the way like a herald of thunder. Children pointed, cats scattered, husbands hid. Neighbors whispered blessings after her, but she brushed them off as if they were flies. "Save your words," she called back. "You'll need them when the child arrives screaming like Ra at dawn." Still, beneath her mockery, there was purpose in every step. For all her bluster, Merit never turned away a woman in pain. That, Taweret noticed from afar. The stubborn kindness tucked between the insults. The goddess smiled, stirring the night breeze. Somewhere in the labyrinth of valleys, laughter drifted faintly, deep and maternal, like the low chuckle of a hippo rising from the water. By the time Merit reached Nubia's small mud-brick house, the air inside was thick with incense and fear. A dozen anxious relatives hovered like moths, whispering prayers to every goddess they could name. The young mother lay sweating beneath a linen sheet, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her breaths shallow as papyrus rustling in wind. Merit clapped her hands for silence. "Out, all of you! I can't deliver a child in a market." The crowd scattered instantly. Even the grandmother obeyed, clutching her charms as if they'd bite. Merit rolled up her sleeves, set her tools in a neat row, and muttered, "If Taweret herself wants to help, she can bring me clean water and stop scaring the patient." Her voice dripped with irritation, but her hands were steady as ever, tracing the rhythm of life she knew by heart. Then came a knock, soft, deliberate, and oddly polite. The door creaked open to reveal an old woman, round as a storage jar and smiling with all her teeth. She leaned on a carved stick, shaped unmistakably like a hippo's snout. Her eyes twinkled with mischief, and her voice carried the warmth of old honey. "Evening, dear," she said cheerfully. "I heard there's a birth and a bit of trouble." Merritt frowned, not looking up from her work. "Unless you brought extra hands or silence, I've no use for either." The woman chuckled. "Oh, I've brought something better. Patience." She waddled in without waiting for permission, humming an ancient lullaby that no one quite recognized. The candlelight bent around her, and though no one said it aloud, the air suddenly smelled faintly of lotus and river reeds. The night dragged on, slow and heavy as the Nile in flood. Sweat beaded on Nubia's brow, and Merritt's voice cracked the air like a whip. "Push, breathe, don't faint, and for the love of the gods, stop apologizing." The old woman sat in the corner, humming between sips of warm beer, unbothered by the chaos. "That's not a hymn," Merritt snapped when she caught the melody. "Depends on your temple," the stranger replied with a wink. Her laughter rippled through the dim room, a sound so deep and genuine that even the frightened grandmother outside chuckled without knowing why. Merritt scowled, but part of her wanted to laugh too. There was something disarming in that sound, something that loosened knots tighter than her linen threads. Then the moment tipped. The child's cry faltered, the air thickened, and every candle flickered at once. For the first time, Merritt hesitated. The old woman rose, her movements surprisingly light. "Let me," she whispered, placing her hands over Merritt's trembling ones. Her palms were cool, steady, and smelled faintly of river clay. "Breathe, child. You do not work alone." A soft pink light washed over the walls, too faint to frighten, too strange to ignore. A heartbeat later, a cry filled the air. Strong, healthy, alive. The room erupted in relief. When Merritt turned to thank the stranger, she was gone. In her place lay a small ivory amulet of Taweret, cracked clean down the middle, glinting softly in the candlelight, like laughter turned solid. Morning came pale and dusty, painting the rooftops of Thebes in shades of rose and clay. Merritt woke stiff-necked, still in her work dress, her hair full of the scent of smoke and sweat. On the floor beside her stool lay the cracked amulet of Taweret, its ivory halves joined by a faint line of gold dust, as though the dawn itself had tried to mend it. "Pretty trinket," she muttered, pocketing it with an eye roll. "I'll return it to Nubia when she's awake. The goddess can reclaim it then." Yet when she reached Nubia's bedside, the young mother smiled dreamily. "The old midwife left it for you, Mistress Merritt. She said you'd need protection more than I." Merritt blinked. "Protection from what?" "From yourself," came the soft reply. Merritt snorted. "Excellent. Even strangers gossip now." But as she turned away, she thought she heard faint laughter, low, rolling, and far too amused to be human. That day her troubles began. Her tools went missing from her basket, only to reappear neatly stacked at the shrine of Taweret near the market. Her jars of oil cracked without reason. Her water turned to froth when she swore. Each time she mocked the gods, something small but inconvenient happened. A sandal strap snapping mid-stride. A stubborn baby refusing to be born until she whispered a blessing. The city's women began to smirk, knowingly. "Perhaps Taweret is playing with you," they teased. Merritt laughed it off, but uneasily. When she opened her palm one evening, she found the amulet glowing faintly, its crack a little narrower than before. "Oh no, you don't," she said to the heavens. "I'm not part of your little joke." But above her, unseen in the fading light, the goddess's laughter rippled like waves against the reeds, kind and relentless. Thebes had long been a city of miracles, but none so petty as the ones that now followed Merritt. Bread refused to rise if she mocked a prayer. Her copper bowl clanged like a drum whenever she lied. One morning, she tried to wash her hands and found the water running backward into the jug. "Ah, splendid," she muttered. "Even my jars have joined the priesthood." The neighbors giggled behind doorframes. Cats followed her in pairs as if attending a parade. When she passed the shrine of Taweret, the statue seemed to smirk, the stone eyes glinting with wicked affection. "You think this is funny, don't you?" Merit grumbled at the goddess. A single lotus petal dropped onto her head in reply. "Fine," she said, brushing it away. "I've been insulted by worse." But when she turned the corner, her sandals had mysteriously filled with river mud. Nebamun, her long-suffering husband, found the situation delightful. "At least the goddess shows you attention," he said between chuckles. "She never visits me." Merit glared. "That's because you're harmless." Yet even she began to notice a pattern. Each time she lost her temper, something trivial went wrong. Each time she showed kindness, something set itself right. Once she comforted a weeping mother, and the crack in the ivory amulet sealed just a hair's breadth more. The old superstition she'd mocked for years now seemed to breathe beside her, warm and faintly mischievous. Still, Merit refused to yield. "If Taweret wants to prove herself," she said aloud one night, "she can come down and say it to my face, and somewhere beyond the rooftops, in the cool silver of the moonlight, the goddess smiled, accepting the challenge." The Nile had swollen all week, but that night it rose like a living god, devouring the banks and swallowing the moonlight whole. Rain hammered on the reed roofs, thunder rolled over the desert cliffs, and cries echoed from every quarter of Thebes. Merit was waist-deep in water, clutching her basket of tools as neighbors screamed for help. A messenger found her, drenched and shaking. A woman in the reed huts, twins, too soon. Merit cursed under her breath, but waded forward without hesitation. Lightning split the sky, lighting her path in flashes of silver and mud. By the time she reached the hut, she was trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what she could not control. The walls groaned, the air reeked of river silt, and the woman's breathing came in shallow bursts. Merit dropped to her knees, soaked, furious, desperate. "If any goddess cares for this one, she'd better prove it now," she shouted. The storm paused, as if holding its breath. The reed walls shimmered, their shadows thickening into shape. Broad hips, lion claws, a grin full of tusks and moonlight. Taweret stood before her, immense and laughing, water streaming down her flanks like tears of joy. "You called, little midwife," she said, her voice rolling like distant thunder, "and I have come uninvited, as births often do." Merit could not speak. The goddess reached down, her great hands glowing with pinkish light, and touched the frightened mother's belly. "Two souls," she murmured, "one bold, one gentle. Let them both see dawn." The air turned warm and still, the cries softened, the rain slackened to a whisper. When the first infant's cry rose, Taweret looked at Merit and said, "You have hands of clay and heart of fire. I only had to teach you which one listens." Then she laughed, a deep, joyous, maternal sound that shook the reeds, and was gone, leaving the amulet whole once more and glowing like a small, captured sunrise. The sun rose over Thebes like a weary blessing, painting the floodwaters in streaks of golden milk. The air smelled of wet earth and relief. Merit sat on the threshold of the reed hut, hair plastered to her neck, her hands still trembling, not from exhaustion this time, but from something holier. Inside, the newborn twins slept soundly, wrapped in dry linen that should have been soaked beyond use. "There, perfect," whispered the mother. She said they would see dawn. Merit nodded, though her throat felt tight. Around her wrist, the ivory amulet gleamed unbroken, the crack sealed into a smooth golden vein. And she pressed it to her heart. It was warm, almost alive. Outside, frogs sang among the flooded reeds, and for the first time in many years, the midwife who mocked the gods said nothing at all. By midday, the news had spread across the neighborhood. Women brought bread, beer, and far too many questions. "You saw her?" they gasped. "Did she roar? Did she glow?" Merit tried to brush them off, muttering, "She was shorter than I expected." But every jest came out softer than usual, and when they laughed, she joined them. Even Nebamon noticed the change. "You're quieter," he said that evening. "Are you ill?" Merit smiled, touching his cheek. "No, husband. Just outnumbered. One goddess, 2 babies, and one very opinionated amulet. It's a crowd." He laughed, and for once she didn't scold him for it. Somewhere above their roof, a warm breeze stirred the air like a sigh of approval, carrying the faint echo of hippo laughter down the winding streets of Thebes. Weeks passed and Thebes returned to its rhythm. Markets bursting with chatter, children shrieking in sunlit courtyards, and every shrine glimmering with fresh offerings. The flood had spared the city, and the people declared it a sign of Taweret's favor. A festival was proclaimed. Drums thundered, wine flowed, and even the most solemn priests found excuses to laugh. Merit was dragged there against her will, dressed in new linen and grumbling like a reluctant bride. The women of her quarter had crowned her the goddess's midwife, and she had to admit, if only to herself, that the title felt warmer than mockery. When she walked past the temple colonnade, the statue of Taweret seemed to wink, its stone grin wink and knowing. A child pressed a lotus into her hand and whispered, "My mother says you saved us." Merit smiled, despite herself. "Your mother exaggerates," she said, then slipped the flower behind her ear. That evening, beneath strings of lamps and a sky still streaked with pink, she found herself laughing more freely than she had in years. She joined in songs she'd once mocked, clapping along as dancers painted with ochre spun like petals on the wind. Nebamoon leaned over his beer and teased, "Careful, people will think you're devout." Merit laughed, a deep, generous laugh that startled even her. "Let them think what they want," she said. "The goddess and I have an understanding." Above the crowd, a gust of wind rippled through the temple banners, carrying the scent of lotus and river clay, the perfume of Taweret herself. For an instant, Merit thought she heard that familiar chuckle, vast and tender, rolling through the night. She raised her cup and toasted the darkness. To laughter, to life, and to hippos who don't take no for an answer. The festival faded and the days grew calmer, filled once more with the cries of newborns and the scent of fresh bread cooling on windowsills. Merit returned to her rounds, slower now, gentler in her scolding, patient even with the fathers who fainted at their own children's first wails. In her work basket lay the ivory amulet, polished smooth, its golden vein gleaming faintly with every heartbeat. When young apprentices asked about it, she'd grin and say, "A gift from a colleague," though her bedside manner could use work. Sometimes, when she placed it on a mother's chest, the baby within would kick, as if responding to a sound no one else could hear. And on the nights when she sat alone, watching the lamps flicker over the flooded fields, she would murmur a small prayer, not because she believed she must, but because she had learned she could. At the edge of the district, near the shrine of Taweret, stood a small clay figurine of the goddess, round-bellied, smiling, her painted colors worn by the hands of countless women. One evening, Merit placed the ivory amulet beside it and whispered, "I think I've borrowed this long enough." She expected silence, but a warm breeze rustled through the reeds, carrying a soft, unmistakable chuckle. Merit laughed too, shaking her head. "All right, keep it then. but next time, warn me before the flood." She turned for home, her shadow long in the lamplight, her laughter echoing faintly across the water. In the shrine, the amulet caught the moonlight and glowed once more, as if the goddess herself were smiling through it, patient, playful, and pleased. Moral: laughter and mercy share one art, to mend the soul, not just the heart.